and any kind of problem, I'm sure I will be able to say something about it. Hopefully I'll be able to solve a problem if that's why you've signed up, or at least give you some creative ways to investigate what the problem really might be. So I'm thinking of this as like a telephone, because I answer the telephone all day long at Wildcare, and I never know what's going to be on the other end of the line. I can tell you that this week it was kind of interesting. We had some interesting phone calls. I had a phone call from a woman who was really upset. It had just happened. They were in their basement cleaning, and they opened a cabinet, and there was insulation in the cabinet, and they didn't think about it being a nest of anything. They just thought of it insulation in the cabinet in the wrong place, take it out. So they went and grabbed it, and little brown animals started running around. So they slammed the cabinet shut and called me. And so the woman was not hysterical. She was, it was okay, but she said her husband was really, it was like a curse word, and he was really upset. So I went over there and with one of my interns to, because I thought that if there's little brown things running around, two people would be better than one. So I went there, and the people were very nice. They had like aspirators on, and we all had our masks on. And we went through a garage to get into the basement, and there was lots of stuff. Like, this was a packed garage full of stuff, packed basement full of stuff. And I was very proud of myself. I had all the equipment I needed. I took 2 little plastic boxes, critter boxes, like I think we had that little frog in for you, Charlene. Yeah, one of those little critter boxes, a small size and a big size, because I didn't have the size of the cabinet. And I had a couple different pieces of cardboard, and I was going to do like a spider trap. I was going to hopefully push it over the insulation nest and then slide a cardboard piece behind, and then just take it out and everything will be fine. So that was the plan that could go awry. But it worked out really well. And I did it, and I could see the little red squirrel faces through the clear plastic. So I knew they weren't weasels, and I knew they weren't chipmunks or any other kind of animal. So, but the reason why I took it away, because we are not an animal removal service. I took it because the people had just recently, a few days before, plugged up holes that led to their basement. So my thinking was that these were orphaned animals because they had plugged up the holes. And when I actually went there, I thought, there's so much stuff in this house, and it's, an old house. I thought I wasn't sure if they were going to be orphans or not. Anyway, I did take them back to Wildcare, and I was going to examine them, but they were so healthy that they were like popcorn, crazy squirrels, and their eyes were open all but one. So they were fat and really upset. They were screaming, and so I just kind of put them in a dark place in an incubator and left them. And the woman said to come back the next day. So the intern went back the next day and set the box up kind of away from the house, but where the red squirrel eats, near a boat. And Fiona watched for a while, and nothing really happened, but the people were home, so they watched it all day. And at one point, the woman called me, or the husband called and said that they had taken 2 babies. So that was like really exciting. The mother had taken 2 babies away. So that was great. Everyone was relieved. And then I spoke to her around 4 o'clock, and she was wrong. The mother didn't take anybody, and all babies were there. So I said, I'll come back at 5 o'clock. I leave at 5 o'clock, I go there. And so I'm just going down to get the box, and I round the corner, and I totally freak out the mother squirrel, who was like on top of the box. So anyway, the woman and the man felt so bad, they let me put the box of squirrels in the garage where the mother had run into, that's attached to the basement, and they closed the door to just let the mother raise the babies. So that was just like perfect. That was great. They went full circle from being terrified, not wanting little things running around, to saying they should, they live here too. So that was a really nice thing.
Okay, who has questions? Burning questions. Your email said ask your burning questions.
Any burning question?
I'm typing. I'm just a slow typer as I was listening.
Oh, you're gonna ask me a question, Claire?
Yeah, because we have to type it, right?
Oh, right.
So I'm going to tell you guys while you're typing that my first squirrel release was last year with Jennifer, and it had a very happy ending, which was awesome. But I didn't realize that when you put the nesting box up, that you didn't just peel off the stuff and they were like happy to be back in a tree and all things were great.
Oh,
Jennifer saying, shield your eyes and step back. And I'm like, I didn't bring any protective eyewear because to me, squirrels are these teeny little things.
no,
But they shot out of that box faster than I have ever seen an animal move in my entire life.
it's like, how do they propel themselves from that little tiny spot to go so far when they come out of the box?
I've never seen anything like it, but it was very exciting. And all things were good because we were at a home where the woman was very excited to also have them.
Oh, that's the one that you video. We did the video.
Yeah. It was my first.
Yeah, that was a little frightening.
So we didn't really want anyone's face to.
No, we didn't. No, that's when I said I'm never doing another release live again. Right.
And you've done them. They've been great.
Yeah.
Okay. So we do have a question. How much longer did the squirrels stay or will they stay in the garage?
Oh my God. Well, hopefully the mother will bring them to another nest. The mother mammals they make other nests, alternate nests for emergency situations, not just people emergencies, but wind and rain and that kind of thing. So I'm assuming she will carry her babies to an already pre-made nest in that lovely garage basement. And their eyes were open, so they were about 5 or 6 weeks old. And they, red squirrels and gray squirrels stay with their mother till they're about 11 or 12 weeks. So I didn't see any food sources in the basement. So I'm assuming that she's living outside and they'll be going outside. And I told the people that the trick is to, seal up how they get in once you know that they're out. And sometimes it's not easy to know that. But they nurse on their mom till they're about 12 weeks old.
So Kate asked a question. She bought hold on one second. She bought a squirrel house last year and she's not sure it's high enough. She saw a squirrel once leaving it, but it looked like they were just checking it out. How would you know if they're interested in the house and whether you should move it up higher or not?
I'm not really sure about the heights because squirrels, when you look in the trees, you can see some of the squirrel nests aren't very high and some of them are so high, like, up to the sky. I don't know of a definite height that is recommended for squirrels. If they do check them out, and if it's a male squirrel or if it's any squirrel, you usually see activity through the hole with stuff. You'll see a branch out or some leaves coming out, and the next day the stuff will be different. So any squirrel will build a nest. If it's a mother squirrel, she would be having her babies, and you'd see some baby activity when they reach about 8 or 9 weeks old. That's when, like, if you're up at the Commons or at the park in Boston, you'll see little bushy-tailed babies up in a tree. Claire saw that a couple of years ago. We're up there. The mother's down eating the peanuts and the walnuts that we're giving her, and the babies kind of creep down, and she yells at them to get back up. And they scoot back up and, she comes and eats. So they start exploring when their tails are nice and bushy, because you never see real baby squirrels wandering around unless they're orphans. And because, it's when they have bushy tails and they're real squirrely, they come out. Does that answer your question, Kate? Yeah, I would say, yeah, just watch it. And the screech owls also like squirrel boxes if it's got the 2-inch hole. So.
Okay, so I have it on very good authority, Jennifer, that you are one of the best moms that has ever lived.
Oh, thank you.
And while you are creative and loving and amazing with all of your humans, it seems that you also are with our wildlife babies, which we are also incredibly grateful for. So one of the questions is, do you think the squirrels remember you when you release them?
I don't think so. I have never, I have to admit that I released, over the years, I've been doing this since 2006. So I have probably released about maybe 6 or 7 sets of squirrels in my yard. And I live in an old house and there's corners. It's a Greek revival house, and so it has that outside molding. And so I do have 2 sets of squirrels who nest in my house in the outside of the molding. I have never had a squirrel approach me that I have raised, and they get really nasty once they turn about 9 to 10 weeks old. They start to pounce you, and they don't want you going near them. And we've been nurturing them for weeks. We don't play with them at Wild Care. We take them out and we feed them, and we make them go to the bathroom. We feed them and we make sure they're clean, and we do tend to talk to them. I have lots of squirrel songs that I sing to them. But once they turn, the hormones come in and they get really nasty, and you really don't like those particular squirrels anymore. You do not feel attached to them. You can reminisce about when they were sweet, but then all kinds of gets fuzzy, and then you look forward to the younger ones again. But there have been problems with when people, like just a regular person, finds a baby squirrel and can't find a rehabber, or just thinks it's cute and tries to feed it, which we certainly don't recommend, because it's special stuff they have to eat, and there's all kinds of rules we follow with squirrels. But when people do it themselves, and we get them from the people when they start to get squirrely. So when they start to reach that nasty age, that's when the people decide that they can't keep it. And those squirrels that come in are, they're unruly. They don't know the new people, but they know people represent food, and we can't normally put them with squirrels the same age as them, because they just don't know how to be with other squirrels, because they've never been with squirrels. And so it's kind of a really awful situation when that happens. But there's been a few times which has been awesome. Last year we had about a 9-week-old squirrel that was injured. It was hit by a car or something, and he like wanted to nurse, but he was really scared, and he was a terrible patient, and we didn't really know what to do with him. We couldn't mix him with anybody else. And then we had the imprinted squirrel, which was like the same. He hated us, couldn't mix him with anybody else. And so it was like, okay, we have a wild squirrel the same age, we'll put them together. So we did that. We in their separate boxes, we put them together in an aviary and on separate walls, because I didn't know what was going to happen. And we had a camera in there, and it worked out perfectly. It got to the point where you couldn't tell the squirrels apart. You'd go in there, nobody came towards you. And they did the squirrel thing. They'd run away, and the imprinted one wasn't lunging at us anymore. And I could tell them apart only because one of them had was missing part of his tail. So that's one way we can deal with squirrels that do know people and have been raised in a way that doesn't wild them up.
Okay. Follow it up on the question about the squirrel box. She said she's noticed that they've chewed on the hole, but that's it.
That's good. That means that they like it. And it might even mean that it's a pregnant squirrel who needs a bigger hole. And that's when they tend to gnaw when they want to get more stuff in. And yeah, the holes in my house have gotten larger as the family's got bigger. And actually, in my house, they share with house sparrows and flycatchers. There must be a channel that goes in deep enough, which is really kind of interesting. Whole ecosystem in there.
They picked the right house.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so Kate also says, as you know, I had a bunny nest in my yard this year. Can I expect the adult mother to return to the same place again?
To have the bunnies in an inappropriate place?
No, can you expect an adult rabbit to put her babies sort of in the same place every year?
Yes, and I know that just because I have had people tell me that over and over again. Last week, somebody brought in baby bunnies that the dog had pounced on and hurt. And she said, she made it in the same exact place, right in front of the dog, right where the dog eats, right in his run. And, a lot of people say that. And some people look forward to seeing their bunnies again in the same place. And because it isn't an issue with a dog or a cat. But I think when if the bunnies last long enough, they do like, if they have successful nests, they do use the same nesting spot again. They're prey animals, so an adult rabbit in the wild doesn't usually last for years and years and years like a domestic one, but doesn't mean it can't happen.
I have some pretty healthy ones right now.
I know, they're so healthy these days.
Yeah. Okay, who else has some questions? Okay. So yes, Wild Care actually does follow other rehabs on social media. So just so you guys know, if you follow us on Facebook or Instagram, which probably a lot of you do, because that's where you're seeing a lot of our information. I get my information that I share from Stephanie, from Jennifer, from our staff. But I do also share things, and Stephanie shares things that other rehabbers have come along. Like we share information about skunks and raccoons and fox and other things that you may encounter, so that you guys have that knowledge. They're not animals that we necessarily take and can rehab at Wild Care. We do things that are non-rabies vector species. Is that right, Jennifer? Did I say that right?
Yes, we do not treat rabies vector species.
Thank you. But like small, we had a salamander success story recently. That was pretty cute.
Yeah, I could tell you success. Yeah, we have lots of animals. There's a lot of different animals in New England, and I used to think they were boring when I was young because they weren't lions and tigers and giraffes and that kind of thing. But there's so many of them, and like so many different bird species, and each bird species is different. They eat different things. They have different nesting trends, and their habitats are in different places. Some creep into holes, some avoid holes. Some live in the Atlantic Ocean all year long, and it's crazy. The birds and even the little mammals. I learned whilst working at Wild Care that those little tiny mouse-like animals that we've known our cats bringing home all our lives. If they have little pointy bitey mouths, they're shrews, and shrews are actually venomous. And so there's a venomous mammal on Cape Cod that, who knows that. And yeah, and they can't kill you, but I guess their venom is very, very potent. And the animals that they do bite, like the salamanders and the or caterpillars or whatever, that's how they can stash their food and all that. Yeah, lots of different things.
Jennifer, this is sort of a little for everyone. The salamander, the child that found that, I actually do theater with her mom. I was so excited to see the photo. And know that somebody that I know and love and have known and loved for years was part of a Wild Care success story. So that was pretty exciting.
Right. Well, so this was the salamander we just released, right?
The spotted, yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you that story if that would be interesting. We don't see a lot of amphibians because people, it's not like they're hopping around people's yards in abundance, and we get frogs when people step on them in their shower, and when plumbers step on salamanders in the wintertime and that kind of thing. But this was a yellow spotted salamander. So they grow to be about that long. I mean, they're large salamanders. They're black with yellow spots. And this woman and her child or her grandchild, your friend there.
Yep.
They were walking in Dennis, and they found the salamander in a snowbank, and they knew it wasn't right, and they brought it to Wild Care, and it was its tail had been kind of mauled, and it had a couple of wounds on its back, and it was so cold. It was, really sad thing. And so, we're looking at it thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do? The tail needs attention. So we thought of the different things that, the resources we have. We just had a symposium that had a class on medications and salamanders. And in my emails that I get, there was an offered lecture by an amphibian vet for other vets and animal professionals to listen to. And I thought, my God, this is so appropriate. So I listened to that, and I learned so much about what to do with that animal. When we get animals that we're not familiar with, we have to research, because we really don't know what to do sometimes. Squirrels and robins, we're all set. But, spotted salamander comes in the middle of winter, what do you do? So I learned that, you don't use tap water because of the chlorine. Amphibians, which I did know, their skin, like our skin is a huge organ, but their skin is super, super different than anything else in the world. They absorb everything. And I'm glad that I listened to this thing, because even latex gloves can be too rough for their skin. So the vet said you should only handle them with nitrile gloves that are already wet. So that was really good. And it had a wound on its elbow that we didn't notice when it first came in. And I was wondering if we had done that to that animal by handling it with latex gloves. Don't know. Anyway, so this animal, we kept it cold. Normally we give heat to animals in distress, and we weren't supposed to do that with this one, so we didn't. And so we kept it like in this cold sphagnum moss. We had Dr. Morgan come and look at it, and with the recommendations of the other resources we had, because she wasn't that familiar with amphibians. She came a couple times, and we treated it for the wounds on its skin. And it actually started to grow fungus on it at one point. It was, my God, there's mold on the salamander, and we're like, what are we going to do? So we read about that and gave it a antifungal bath, which was pretty awesome. And then we rinsed it right away, because you don't want to leave anything on a salamander's skin, because it just keeps absorbing and absorbing and absorbing. And Dr. Morgan, we did that together, and we crossed our fingers, and it got better. The wounds just healed. The spots came back to where the scar, I thought it would be scar tissue, but it looked just like the salamander by the time it looked. And the tail fell off, like Dr. Morgan said it would, because when you've done a lot of amputations, when things fall off, which is a whole other thing that I learned at Wild Care. You think that vets wouldn't let things fall off, but sometimes that's the best thing, because the body just takes care of it. And we have pictures of this salamander, and the body just went over that last vertebrae and resorbs the bone. So it's pretty cool. So how do you release the salamander? I consulted with Peter Troll, who is a salamander expert, naturalist, person on Cape Cod. And so he was saying, the closest vernal pool near where you found it, and your friend found it somewhere near Eagle Pond in Dennis. So she knew I guess the president of the conservation, the Barnstable Conservation, and he knew where all the vernal pools were. So they worked together, and I packed him up in his sphagnum moss, in nice and wet, and I had two nitrile gloves for the woman who had found it, who was going to release it, and I told her to wet them before she picks up the salamander, and to just pick up the sphagnum moss and kind of just plant it in the leaf mold where the man had recommended doing that. So it all went well.
Yes, I can tell you that the granddaughter Elizabeth was thrilled that it all went the way that it was supposed to. It was quite
Yeah.
magical for her. So
Yeah, it was exciting. It's exciting for people. It's, it's so hard when you bring something here and it doesn't make it, and people call and they want to know how, their bunny rabbit is or whatever. And I have to tell them it didn't make it. And that's, this was perfect, because this had disaster, all over it. It was a crush. It was like a poor little crushed animal in the middle of winter, and who could have been frostbitten at that point too.
yeah. I don't know if you guys can see this. I know it's device to device, but that is little Elizabeth with her grandmother.
Oh,
I know, isn't she cute? They were
that's
so
sweet.
excited. So that's actually a great success story. So we have a couple of questions that kind of are all wrapped together.
Oh, good.
So we want to know what you wish you knew before you became a wildlife rehabber, and what does it take to become a wildlife rehabber? Let's start there, and then I'll field you a few more.
What do I wish I knew?
How exhausted you'd be?
No, it's good I didn't know that. Um, I think I had kind of an inkling about what it was like, because I volunteered for so long and I saw all this going on around me. So yeah, I didn't realize that I'd be here 14 hours a day sometimes. But what was the second half of the question?
What does it take to become a wildlife rehabber?
Well, like, just legally, you have to have a license. So you have to study, take classes, study, and pass an exam. I think that you have to be able to separate, from my standpoint, to be the way I've had to do it is you can't fall in love with any of the animals. You fall in love with a breed of, or species of animal, and you look forward to the nuthatches when they come in and hope that you can help them. You don't fall in love with the nuthatch that you're feeding, every day. You can't do that. You can't. I don't see how anybody could stay in this field for very long without being able to disconnect from individuals. And then you have to, like, understand that you're doing that, and accept that you're disconnecting. And I think that's the hardest part, is to just, like, suck it up all the time. And you have to euthanize this, and you have to do that, and you have to open the box of, and look at the turtle that just got hit by a car, and you have to euthanize it, but you're going to take its eggs out so the babies will live. And you have to get past, like any medical thing, the blood and guts and all of that. It's all just a big circle. And I think what I've learned the most, being in this field for so long, is that it is really a circle of life out there. It's like everything eats each other. Nothing lasts long. And it's made me understand death so much better, I think. You have to be able to deal with death when you do this, because it's just all the time. I mean, it's either preventing it or taking action to make it, or just seeing it happen in front of you. And it's like, I don't think I cry anymore, but it's hard for a while. But you just, it's the human impact on almost everything that we get. And since everything's going to be eaten, it's like, why bother helping it? But they wouldn't have been hit by a car, they wouldn't have had a concussion, because the building wouldn't have been there 1,000 years ago. And so I think I feel that it's a necessary thing in a community, and that this community is really lucky to have 2 wildlife places that you can bring something to and hope for the best, and know people are going to care for it and try to get it back. So yeah, and the euthanasia, the criteria we have for certain things, you just have to know why it's there. And I wish that I knew that well before I started, because that was like denying that we can really, trying to take care of things that aren't going to make it. Once you've done this a long time and you just have protocols and you don't try, that was really hard to accept. But it's necessary and it makes sense. And it's nice that people have been doing this for that long, that there are protocols to follow so that you don't have animals suffering longer than they need to.
All right. Okay. And you kind of covered this, but I just want to be really clear about it. Can you rehab animals in your home without a license?
You aren't allowed to do that. People do. I mean, that's what, I don't know. When I was a kid, it probably wasn't against the law. I'm not sure, but that's how I became interested in animals, because everyone would bring the animals to my mother and she would take care of the birds and the babies that were found, and, you know, just animals that people picked up and thought they were stray or something. But in Massachusetts, and I think every state at this point, you are not allowed to take care of wild animals. You're allowed to have some as pets, not that many. Like, you know, there's certain turtles that aren't against the law to have, but you're not allowed to rehabilitate them at your house. So that's kind of a strange kind of law. But there's only a few species of animals that in birds that are not migratory, so they are not protected. And those would be the animals that you might be able to take care of legally. But in general, I remember the authorities telling me that every animal in Massachusetts belongs to the state of Massachusetts, and nobody else has any say about it but us. And we work for them.
And there you have it.
Yeah.
All right. So why does Wild Care recommend that you not give animals food or water when you find them?
Oh, yeah, that's a hard one to accept. But the reasoning is that if a wild animal is hurt enough to let you pick it up, and people are big predators, so a little bird that lets you pick it up because it's on its side, and, you know, obviously isn't well, would be a dead bird if you were a fox. So these animals, most of the animals that people actually pick up and bring home and call us about are really not well. And if they're, almost everything that comes in wild care is dehydrated and skinny and not well, because they've been suffering for a long time. They haven't been able to eat for a long time. So they are, whatever was wrong with them to begin with, on top of that, they haven't drunk or eaten anything. So when animals or people are like that, when they haven't had anything to drink, the cells in their body start to not function right. And if you're really, really thirsty and you haven't had a drink all day, you're not supposed to go home and just guzzle lots of water, because it can make you sick. So these animals are apt to be so sick that if you offer a squirrel, you know, peanuts when it hasn't eaten or drunk anything from its mother for 5 days, it will probably die. And offering water is, they can aspirate it, because you're offering water through a drop to a bird, and they don't know how to drink from that, and they can breathe in because they're freaked out, because all these animals are stressed out. If you put a bowl of water in with an opossum during the night that was hit by a car, if that opossum isn't well enough to even stand up, it could, you know, fall into the water and drown. So it's a lot of different things. And sometimes when somebody can't get an animal to us and we talk to them, and I can feel and kind of know what the situation is with the animal, I might say, why don't you put a little bit of water in there, or put a wet face cloth in, because I feel like that might be safe. But we had a horrible situation a few years ago, because there was a nest of squirrels that were orphaned. It was way up a tree. It was in Wellfleet. And one by one, the babies were coming down. So people had one baby and called, and you know, I said that there's usually, you know, 4 or 5 baby squirrels. So if you see one, listen for others. They listened for others, and they knew where the nest was. So they brought like 2 squirrels in when they should have, and then they kept one overnight and fed it bird seed, and it died. So it's that's why. And usually it's not going to hurt the animal any further if it's just gonna be put away for a night.
Okay. Is there anything that you thought you knew 100% was true about wildlife until you worked with an animal and that animal proved you wrong?
Like if I thought an animal was a certain way, and then, well, squirrels, I never thought they would become so horrible to someone who took care of them, for 6 weeks of their life. That was crazy. I mean, that was a shock. I can say that the seabirds that we work with, they come in really debilitated. And for years, I would see the same, like gannets would come in and they'd be dehydrated and weak and sick, and they behave a certain way. They kind of bark at you and they get better, and then they would, be swimming and they'd be waterproof, and we would go to release them. And I had no idea what a healthy gannet was like until somebody brought one here. We had a storm, and a gannet got blown into someone's yard, and they said they wrangled it and they brought it in, and I opened the box thinking it was going to be the same old kind of gannet that I'd seen, dozens of, and it like flew out of the box. It was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. It was all over the clinic, and they're huge birds, and it was running after us. So, that was like, that blew me away. And that made me realize that, that's what a healthy wild animal's like. Like, we make them as healthy as we can, and we can only get to the point where we have a checklist of everything that we've done that, is good, and they're good to go. But wow, like a real wild animal that has nothing wrong with it is a fierce thing. And
what is your favorite animal to work with?
Squirrels.
I think that's been obvious since the
Yeah.
beginning of this talk.
Squirrels are wonderful, and gulls. I love working with the herring gulls and the great blackback gulls. They are they're usually really nice patients. They know where the food comes from right away, like 99% of the time. Sometimes gulls are like that gannet, but usually they understand where the food comes from. They understand the crate that they're supposed to go into. They wait for their food. They do not like to be touched. You don't touch them. But and the great blackback gulls are so huge, you don't realize how big they are. And I can look at a great blackback gull from a distance in the clinic and just think, my God, he's so beautiful. He could just pop a little dovekie bird into his mouth and swallow it right now. And that's like a horrible thought, because these little dovekies that we get, little penguin birds, they're adorable, and I love them, and I love the gulls, and I know the gull would just love to just eat one and swallow it whole. But it's like, I can look at a gull with endearment thinking that, it's just, you got to be crazy to work in this field.
We all are a little bit, I think.
Oh,
Jennifer, what do you think the most misunderstood animal on the Cape is?
an opossum.
I agree.
An opossum is a misunderstood animal. It's not thought of as very pretty. They beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. I never thought they were very pretty until I worked here. I never saw a baby possum. I never saw an opossum up close that wasn't on the road dead. I hadn't seen what they're like when they're alive. And the little baby possums, they're marsupials. So they're born, like, I believe the Virginia possum, which is the one that is here, has the smallest newborn mammals in the world. I believe it's them. They're really tiny. So they're like 13 days after conception or something. They crawl out of the uterus and they go into the pouch and they secure themselves on a nipple. And they're like, they're developed in the pouch. So if someone sees one of those really, really young possums, they're hideous looking. They look like a fetus. And, when you see these different stages of an opossum, I can understand. And I felt the same way. They're really weird, but they're so cool. I mean, they have the superpowers of acting, where their defense is to, and I've experienced this, their defense is to like go into this coma thing, open their mouth, drool, the tongue comes out, they smell horrible. They have glands that make them smell horrible, and they just have diarrhea, like all at once. They're doing this, and it's their defense, and it convinces wild animals who are hungry that they don't want to eat them. That's what they do. And they have like the most teeth of any mammal, I believe, the number of teeth in their mouth, and they aren't a predator, really. They look like an alligator, but I've never been bitten by an opossum. I have almost been bitten by an opossum, but usually when we handle them here, they cower. They go into their gaping mouth smell thing, and you can kind of lump them around and kind of examine them when they're doing that. Their tails are awesome. They carry things with them. The babies are a joy. The babies don't smell very good. So, they aren't the best. Squirrels smell wonderful, and possums have an odor that isn't very pleasant. But when you see them together, you can raise a group of, we get hit by car mom possums, and we ask people to bring the whole possum in so we can get the babies out safely. And so I think we had like 12 groups of possums last year. It was a big possum year. So there's a lot on the Cape again. And they start to eat on their own. They don't suckle like squirrels or cats or other mammals. And their mother, they swallow the nipple and it's just there. So when they're really small and we're dealing with them when they aren't eating yet, we actually put a tube down their throat that they actually swallow really easily, because it's natural for them to swallow the nipple. So that's kind of bizarre. But they hang on you and they crawl, and they actually hang from their tails when they're babies. The big ones can't because they're much too heavy, but you can watch them with each other, and sometimes they'll actually gather grass in their tail. They curl it up, and it's like an elephant with its trunk, but it's the tail on an opossum. And you'll see them, gathering stuff in their little habitats that we have before we release them. So they are misunderstood. They eat anything. They clean up your yard. They eat lots of ticks. They don't hurt anybody. It's hard to convince people that if there's an opossum under their house that it's not going to do anything bad, but they don't scratch through. They don't gnaw. They're just there because there's some kind of food source for them. They don't really have a home. They carry their babies around, and when the babies get heavy, they have up to 13 babies, and they carry them for weeks, and they just get too big and they just kind of drop off, and they start their life roaming around.
We should all sometimes be so lucky.
Well, right.
Yeah.
People are terrified. You might all know the story, but I got a call years ago from a terrified person because there was an opossum behind her toilet. She was terrified. And, and by the end of the phone call, I convinced her that she could, catch it and bring it in, because I told her it wasn't going to jump, because they don't jump. And I asked if it was bigger than her fist, and she said no. So I said, so it's a baby, so you don't have to be afraid of it. And they actually came back to release it. So so they are very misunderstood. They can be hideous.
But they eat all the bad things.
They eat all the bad
I always
things.
get excited when I have one because I'm like, woohoo, no ticks for me.
Yeah, they're little vacuums.
Totally, absolutely.
Yeah,
I
very
feel that
very
way
odd
about
animal.
fox, too.
What?
I feel that way about fox too. We don't treat fox, but I always consider myself lucky when I have an opossum and a fox because I feel like they're taking care of all the things I don't want to deal with.
Yeah, and I'm jealous of all the people who call me because they're seeing all these things happen outside. And I see so many animals, but they're all sick when they come in here. And I go bird watching and I'm thrilled, when I see anything. And but I've never seen foxes playing in my yard. I haven't had all these experiences where people call and they think something's wrong and it's not. We get calls for if people see a hawk in one place on the ground, they think something's wrong. Or if they see a fox in their yard, they're afraid because they know they can have rabies. But I'll say, is it in the sun? And they'll say yes. And I say, does it look happy? And they say, yes, it's just washing itself. And I said, well, it was like 30 degrees for the last week, and this is the first nice day in the springtime. And so he's just really happy. And he's just sunning himself. And it's really awesome. We have so much neat wildlife on the Cape. And people are getting used to seeing things. I think we've really helped people understand that they don't have to be afraid of everything.
I think so too. And this past year was a big one for that because we had people that were home during the day that aren't typically home during the day. So they were seeing a lot of things here earlier in the season that they're usually here. And this actually is a great lead up to our next question.
What?
I keep reading that it is illegal to relocate wildlife in Massachusetts, and that if an animal is relocated, it usually does not survive. Why is this?
Well, everybody has their own territory and their familiarities with things. So if you catch a skunk, or I guess that's not a good example because no one wants to catch that. But if you trap an opossum or a squirrel, let's say a squirrel is in your attic and you trap it and you take it 20 miles away and you cross the canal and you put it in a woods, that squirrel's not going to have any knowledge of where anything is at first. And it's going to be vulnerable to all the predators, which at its home would kind of know where the predators are and where to be careful and all of that. So you totally disorient these animals and they try to get home. I mean, there's stories of, pets that cross the country to get back home, but the animals do try to get back to their territory. And that means they're going to be crossing all the roads that you drove past to get where you've put them. And you've separated them from their mates and or their babies. And, it's totally disruptive. It's not like they all know exactly what to do just because they're animals and you put them in what you think is a good place for them. I'm sure people would take an animal, like if they trapped a fox or something, and wouldn't really think about all the requirements that animal's going to need for it to survive. And you wouldn't want to just put a seabird in the woods. It's that kind of thing where it's just not going to function. Not familiar with what predators are around and that kind of thing. And for rehabilitators, we are supposed to put our animals that we get as close to where they were found as possible. And they're supposed to stay in the same county. So, Cape Cod, that's pretty easy because it's all just Cape Cod. But when we get animals from other locations, we can send them back to where they're supposed to go. And it can mix diseases too. Just because it's a squirrel on Cape Cod, if you take it to Western Massachusetts, it might have some kind of disease that, or have some kind of condition that's like on the Cape, and that could be fine in that population, you could spread that somewhere else. And also there's gene mixing, which is kind of complicated, but that's something to consider too. Like you're taking, I learned at WildCare that robins that are all over the country have different dialects and they don't speak the same language. They sound the same to us, but if you take a robin from Maine and put it in Florida, they're not going to communicate the same way. So there's a lot of stuff we don't know. So it is best to keep them as close as you can. It's hard to convince people of that when they've had these animals in their attic.
That's true. Everyone needs to buy some nesting boxes this year. Okay, and I don't know if you know the answer to this. The state relocates bears. Are bears different, do you think? And is that okay because there's fewer of them?
That is beyond my knowledge. I would assume, the state has all these people that you don't really know exist unless you, like, I didn't know what Fish and Wildlife really consisted of until I actually kind of work for them. But there's biologists for every type of animal. So there's biologists that are in charge of the mammal situations in Massachusetts, and there's an ornithologist who is, that's who we communicate with for the birds, and there's a herpetologist. So that's who we ask questions about the turtles and the snakes that we have too. So I'm assuming that they know what they're doing and they consider all these things. And there's the age of the animal, there's the need for the relocation of the animal. And I'm sure that they have their failures and their successes with those things.
All right, Jennifer, if you could do anything else right now and you could not work at WildCare, what would you be doing?
Oh,
Rehabbing squirrels at home and not telling anyone?
no. If I left here, it would mean that I didn't want to, that it got too much for me or something. And I kind of always wanted to be a school bus driver someday.
Oh my God, you'd be so
And I always kind of wanted to work at a hardware store. I don't think I'm going to do either of those things, but
no, we're never letting you leave. I'm sorry.
I don't have any aspirations to work in a zoo or to go to Australia and be with kangaroos or anything. Maybe if I was younger, but this is kind of the perfect job for me, except, for the exhaustion and it's not just working with animals. I work with people. So it's all these people working together, and they're all animal people. So everybody's a little bit odd. And it's a wonderful place. It's a wonderful place to be. And animal wise, I don't think I'd want to do anything else. So, or be a kindergarten teacher. That could be fun too.
Oh my God, you would be so crazy good at that. But we're keeping you. So she's not becoming a kindergarten teacher, everyone, or a bus driver. I'm sorry. Your grandchildren are just going to have to wait.
Yes.
So I think that brings us to about an hour. Thank you guys for your very thoughtful questions. We're going to let Jennifer get back to it since we work her pretty hard almost every day. Jennifer, thank you so much. I hope everyone learned a little bit. I will tell you that WildCare is an amazing place to be, and thank you so much for your support. Sign up for our talk next Wednesday or the Wednesday after. We will see you for the next few Wednesdays into June. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.
Thank you for coming. I hope I answered some questions.
You sure did, Jennifer. Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks a lot.
Bye.